of the heart flows the issues of life. And many of these issues stem from one's emotional, mental, and spiritual condition. Such issues may oppress, stifle, and even stagnate one from living a healthy and fulfilling life. So how does one progress past such issues and achieve a state of emotional, mental, and spiritual healing? There's help, so open your heart and prepare your mind. It's time for healing to take place in your life. You're in tuned to Talking with Dr. Toy, a holistic approach to emotional healing. And now, your host, licensed professional counselor, Dr. Toy Lisa Mitchell.
It's just me and you. I feel so lost, 'cause I don't know what to do.
Well, good Sunday morning. Thank you so much for tuning in to Talking with Dr. Toy. Comes your way every Sunday. First and foremost, I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast, broadcast. Listen, I am so grateful that you've taken time out of your schedule just to tune in to see, what might be on the agenda for today. And so I'm so grateful and I do not count that lightly. So you know what I always do? I always want to provide my purpose. My purpose is to provide a holistic approach to emotional healing. Therefore, my mission to provide a holistic and restorative therapeutic approach in addressing and resolving issues that adversely affect the emotional, psychological, spiritual, and physical well-being of individuals who desire to enhance their quality of life. Want to do a self-care check? How are you? How are you? And what are you doing for self-care? This is so very important. So many things happening in our world today, and it's so important to prioritize not only your physical health, but the mental health. Remember that mind-body connection, and the ways in which we can do that is definitely implementing self-care strategies. I love how one person put it, and I love this, and I've been using this. They have said that, in what ways am I protecting my peace? I love that. And so first and foremost, really identifying what brings you peace and what does that look like for your life, and what are ways that you can cultivate more of that and protect that. Because in protecting our peace, we're protecting our hearts, our minds, our souls, and we're cultivating those things that we need in order to help us navigate the situations of this life. Someone said it like this: when we talk about aspects of stress, they kind of framed it in this way, is that you experience stress when the things that you are experiencing, you do not have the resources to be able to navigate those situations. That the experiences, the situations and circumstances of your life really outweigh and outbalance the resources that you have to deal with those. And so one of the things that in ways in which we manage stress, and that we definitely can navigate it in a way that's going to be healthy and helpful for us, is to cultivate those resources in our lives, right? And what that looks like for one person may be different from you. But that's why it's so important to cultivate some time in your schedule where you can really connect and reflect on where I am and what is needed for me in this moment. And so if we are stressed, then we need to connect and be curious about, okay, what helps me to relieve stress in healthy and let me emphasize that, in healthy and helpful ways. Because sometimes we can manage stress in ways that are not so healthy for us, nor helpful. So we want to clue in and really connect with curiosity and exploration, as well as implementation of those things that help me navigate stressful situations in a way that when I am navigating them, I am getting stronger and not weaker, right? And so that is important. And in order for you to kind of know what works, because here's the thing, I also put forth to clients as well, that we've got to have different tools in our toolkit, because sometimes things don't need a hammer, right? A hammer is not going to work on everything. So you need another tool. So based on what you are experiencing and how you're experiencing it, this tool that you've been, used to using all the time may not work for you in this situation, in this context. So it's really good to have other tools in your toolkit, whether that be diaphragmatic breathing, whether that be progressive muscle relaxation, whether that be prayer, whether that be meditation, whether that be walking. One of the things that kind of helps you really maintain and regulating anxiety and stress is resourcing yourself. These things that help you tap into things that will help you navigate a situation in an optimal way that you feel empowered. And sometimes that takes, let me say this, not sometimes, that takes intentionality. We have to be intentional, and that takes self-awareness. We talk about this aspect of self-care, right? We cannot talk about self-care without self-awareness, because if you are disconnected from yourself, and I'm telling you, in a world in which we're living and a lot of things happening, and disconnection can happen so automatically that we may not even realize it. And so when we're disconnected, we don't know what's happening within us. We don't know what we need. So being able to connect, that is the key, right? And so that takes intentionality, and that will help to cultivate self-awareness. So I'm encouraging you, especially in times like these, please be vigilant of really implementing aspects of self-care, and then this concept of community care. The power of collective caring, people committed to leveraging their privilege to be there for one another in various ways. Again, how I frame this: how did you show up for others, and how did you allow others to show up for you? So very important to cultivate this in our lives. These are lifelines. Again, these are lifelines. So I'm hoping you, and basically when we talk about that passage of scripture that Jesus came that we may have life and may have it to the full, that we may have it more abundantly, I do believe implementing some of these aspects will help you definitely achieve that. And we also really have to realize that even when we think about and we process living the abundant life, doesn't mean that we live an abundant life without problems, without traversing through storms and situations. But one of the things that we're doing is that we're building up your system in ways where you're not only, and I love this aspect of not just persevering, pushing through it, but really cultivating aspects of resilience in that sense. That you are taking what is happening to you, and also you're able to find strengths in the ways that you're navigating it. And then we'll achieve, one of those things we talk about, especially when you've experienced trauma, achieving post-traumatic growth, right? These are things that are going to help you, give you lifelines to living that life that's going to be optimal for you as well as your family. So I wanted to kind of get into this today. And last week we talked about just acknowledging Women's History Month, and just put forth just some of the things to really contemplate and think about as you are God's masterpiece, and being able to find that balance between accomplishing things, but also too showing yourself unconditional worth. I was actually talking with someone about that this week. Let me say that. I was actually talking to someone about that this week, where we talk about this concept of unconditional worth. And basically the person said something very powerful, just said, well, that seems aspirational. right? In some ways, kind of juxtaposing, it seems aspirational, but not a reality, right? That when we think about this concept of unconditional worth, basically the person was saying, aspirational, but is it really, is it a reality? Can you really show yourself unconditional worth and value? And so I took that like very great question, because I think in some ways when we think about our worth and our value, I think sometimes we definitely tie it to what we have done, what we've accomplished. And we also may tie it to what we haven't done and what we haven't accomplished. So I think very valid question. And as I pondered that, I began to ask myself, is it aspirational? Is it possible? And the answer that I came up with in my perspective was absolutely it is possible. Absolutely it is possible. Absolutely it can be a reality. But one of the things that I also wanted to think about too was, even if I believe that it's a reality, but if there are others, in their own lives that really are processing it the same way, to say it sounds like something to aspire to, but don't really see that as a reality, then what I perceive doesn't matter, because it really comes down to what this person really thinks. Because how you perceive a thing, we talk about this aspect that our perceptions are reality. And I think we really have to be honest with that and honor that if there's someone who doesn't see this as a reality, but is aspirational, then we may want to do some backtracking as to what keeps me, what are the challenges? What are the challenges that keep me from seeing this as beyond just being aspirational, right? What are those challenges? Because I can't answer that for you. Only you can answer that for you. But it may be worth exploring with someone that if you're like, you know what, I really don't know. Remember, we talked about that last time too. Maybe getting some outside assistance in really kind of contemplating and thinking about what in ways can help me really make that a reality, or what are some ways that is challenging for me to even see that as a reality. And so I want to put forth this, because one of the things that I've come across, and I wanted to kind of hone in on this today, is that I think sometimes one of the barriers that may prevent us, or maybe keep us from seeing this aspect of, or experiencing this aspect of unconditional worth, may be when we look at what has happened in our past, right? When we look at what has happened in our past, I think that in some ways can impact how we view ourselves and how we see ourselves. I was, talking with clients, and some of the things that we are living with in our present moment are some regrets of our past. And sometimes the regrets of our past really are so pervasive that we don't see our worth and we don't see our value, right? And sometimes what that has been, of course, wrapped up in is things that I do, right? Things that I do for others, and how that makes me feel. And it's great to be a servant. It's great to utilize your gifts to help others. Definitely not negating that. But I think what happens too is that we see that as an aspect of that's who we are and how we are because of what we do. And even though I've talked about this before, I think we still, in some ways, it's hard for us to or we may, like the person said, it's aspirational. But I don't think it's a reality in my life. I don't think I can ever get to that point where I see my worth and my value outside of what I do. And some of that may be based on, to some degree, what I've done. And maybe you're in this place of where you are in this present moment. And it's hard for you to see a vision of a healed or a healing. Let's say that. I love that. Healing you. Because what's been in your past has been maybe so much brokenness, and how you have responded out of that brokenness that you can't see who or whose you are in this present moment from a lens of unconditional worth and value. Now, for those of you that you're like, well, that's not my struggle. Listen, so grateful that it's not your struggle. I'm so grateful. Continue to fill yourself with those things that are of value and of worth, and continue to walk in that way where you're like, man, I can hold my head up high, that even though I may have made a mistake or anything like that, hey, it's a mistake. I'm able to move on and move forward. There are those of us who can definitely do that. And my goal and my hope is that you will continue to do that. And here's the thing. If you're able to do that, then beautiful. And maybe what that can mean for you is that, how can I help someone else? Right? How can I help someone else on their journey? But I do know, just in being in practice, there are some who are not there. There are some who are still, in some ways, anchored in the past of their younger selves, that made mistakes, that see themselves in a light where, because of what they've done in the past, it makes them unworthy in the present. And in some ways, helpless and hopeless in their future. Because basically the connotation is what I've done is who I am. Right? And what I've done is who I am, and it is who I will always be. And sometimes we may have people in our lives that may cling to that narrative. They may cling to that narrative of you being who you were, and they are seeing you that's all of you, who you're going to be. And they may say these things to you, or they may treat you in ways that reinforces that. And so part of this for you, with regards to seeing this aspect of unconditional human worth, may be worth taking a trip back in the past. And remember what I always say, remember this, that we don't live in the past, right? We don't live there, but we learn from it. Yes, we learn from it. And so part of this process may be for you being able to connect to the past in a way as to, when was I always like this, where it was difficult for me to see my human worth and value? Have I always been this way? And being able to also process, if I had not always been this way, when did this begin for me? Right? When did this start? And I want to take you back to this powerful quote, not mine, but I love it. Basically, it says this, and I love this quote. It says, you are important and valuable as a person because your essential core self is unique, precious, and infinite, eternal, unchanging value, and good, right? Unconditional human worth implies that you are as precious as any other person. Now, I know when we think about that aspect of good, we definitely bring in the biblical context where it says none are good. Our righteousness is as filthy rags. And that is definitely talking about our sinful nature, right? Those of you who subscribe to Christianity definitely talks about our sinful nature. And so there is this part, we've talked about this too, maybe I need to refresh that when we had this series where we talked about our shadow parts. Yeah, right. Those dark parts of us that we want to hide away, that we want to cover up. We all have them, right? We all have those parts of us that are not good, that can be toxic, right, to others, that can be toxic to ourselves, those dark areas of us. And sometimes, and we talked about this as well, that when we think about those aspects of our life, well, sometimes we don't want to think about it because we, want to see ourselves in a positive light all the time. But there's definitely truth to this passage, that even our righteousness is as filthy rags because of our humanity. We have limitations, and there are these shadow parts that we have of us that are not good, right? However, one of the things that what's helpful in that is not to hide them and cover them up, because basically in some ways, when we hide and cover them up, we don't devise ways to navigate them. We don't devise ways of how can I improve this area of my life if we don't take it out and put it in front of us to examine it and to be transparent with God about it, right? Why would it be, let me say it this way. How helpful would it be to come to a God who knows all of you, every aspect of who you are, and come to God in a suit and tie, made up, masked up, as if you're coming before someone who doesn't see beyond all of that? Being able to be transparent before God is not for his benefit, because he knows you. It's for yours. Because what this does, it allows you to bring all of this before God, and for a light to be shown on that, but also to invite the God who deems you worthy, valuable, right? We know, going back to that passage of scripture, we are fearfully and wonderfully made in his image, who loves you unconditionally. God is love. So why not bring all that before a God who loves you anyway, to shine light on that and to provide you with wisdom and knowledge, the motivation, the heart, all of that, to devise ways to improve that, to navigate that, whether that be process of deliverance, healing, correction, discipline. All of those things are what a dad or what a father does. So I'll probably do a refresher on those shadow parts, because that's another aspect too of that unconditional, or struggling to really see as a reality that unconditional worth. Because when we look at ourselves, we see the negative, right? We see the negatives. And then going back to what we talked about, taking a few steps in the past, looking at our younger selves, we are maybe standing in this present moment judging our younger selves in such a way where we're judge and jury. And we don't see and perceive our younger selves as something of worth and value, but maybe something of shame and embarrassment. And instead of really cultivating and nurturing that former self, ways to heal, we look for ways to hide and cover up, or maybe deny, right? In ways. But what if we practice this aspect of integration, right? Seeing aspects of how we were as a young, as our younger selves, and being able to integrate that, bring that into this present moment and show that younger self of you the love, the care, the nurture, or maybe really beginning to understand that former self of you. Because I've said this and I'll say this again. When you are so quick to judge, you in many ways negate understanding. That's why many people don't want to be around others who always judge them, right? Who always judge them. Because basically it's a process of judging, means that there's an expectation that you are not meeting. And when you are around someone like that is always judging an expectation that you're not meeting, I think it's why Jesus talked about it in the Bible. When we talk about, we judge, what he said, the needle in someone else's eye, and we got a big old stick in our eye, but we're judging them. So I think that's why Jesus talked about it, because what happens is that judgment really, because the only one in a position to really judge is God. Right. However, when we take on the mantle of judging, then part of this process is that we may negate, especially if we go straight to the judging, then what we do is that we dismiss or we negate understanding, seeking to understand. Now, listen, I'm not saying that people are not held accountable for what they do. I'm not saying that. It is with reason that the Bible talks about discipline, that God disciplines those whom he loves. So not saying any of that, but what I am saying is this: when we are quick to judge, we're slow to understanding. We're slow to understand. And when you're slow to understand, that in some ways can really erect barriers. In my perspective, it can erect barriers to healing and restoration, because people won't be willing to be vulnerable if that's all they receive is judgment. Seek to understand. And that's why bring it back to even aspects of your younger self. If there's something happening where you are still struggling to reconcile how you were in the past or who you were in the past, and you're still using that as a measuring rod for how you show up in the present moment and what you perceive about what's ahead of you in your future, that we may want to do some work with, am I understanding that aspect of myself when I was younger? Am I solely judging? What was happening in my life during that time, right? What was happening during my life when I did that, or when I thought that, or when I made that? What was going on? within me. And then part of this process is, how can I, in this present moment, be a safe refuge for that former self and integrate that into my life, not in a way where I stay in that place of shame, but I'm offering a refuge of nurturing, of understanding, right? And of hope. I think that is where we start. That may be a starting place when we think about this aspect of unconditional worth. And I think for Women's Month, this is so very important. So very important. So I'm asking you, if this is where you are, I'm asking you to cultivate a little time out of your busy schedule. What do you think about your former you, right? What are some areas that you may be still stuck in, right? That you've not reconciled? And what is needed for that former self to come in agreement and healing with who you are in this present moment and who you desire to be in the future? I would encourage you to process that. And you know what I've been asking you to do? 10 minutes. Maybe 10 minutes, 2 days a week. Cultivating that reflection time. This is something that we can do in that reflection time. Because I do believe these are lifelines to making the difference between something that is aspirational and something that can be a lived reality in your own life. And in my perspective, I believe it can. That unconditional human worth, I do believe is more than, it's not just aspirational. It can be a reality. Because I recall in the passage that we can do all things through Christ Jesus. We can do all things. And when we serve a God who loves us unconditionally, a God who is love, the more that we connect in that aspect with that God of love, the more I believe we can see our reflection in his word, see our reflection for who he sees us as. Children to be loved. I love it. Who rejoices over us, who rejoices over us with singing, telling you, yeah, we got those shadow parts, but he sees all that too. And still rejoices over us with singing. I believe God wants us to share in that. And that is possible. Well, listen, that's all I have for today. Remember what I always say before departing. Relentlessly and intentionally pursue authentic and genuine relationships vertically with God, horizontally with others, and inwardly with yourself. Maintain and sustain a keen sense of awareness and ongoing discovery about self as well as others. Take good care of you and engage in things that are helpful for your mind, body, soul, and spirit. And remember, out of the heart flows the issues of life. Let's continue to talk about it and continue our journey towards emotional healing. Until next time, bye-bye.
You've been in tuned to Talking with Dr. Toy, providing a holistic approach to emotional healing with your host, licensed professional counselor, Dr. Toy Lisa Mitchell. Please connect with me at talkingwithdrtoy.com or Facebook at Talking with Dr. Toy or email talkingwithdrtoy@gmail.com. I would love to hear your story and hear your heart regarding the issues of life you may be experiencing. Remember, out of the heart flows the issues of life. Let's continue to talk about it. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for listening, and please join me next week for Talking with Dr. Toy.